Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Insurance Nexus webinar on automation success stories, hosted by myself, Graham Proud, Project Director of Insurance Nexus, and with me, Scott Jacobs, QBE European Operations, and Steve Tate, Head of Claims Automation, RSA. A brief word on Insurance Nexus to begin with. Essentially, if you've not come across us before, we act as a networking hub for insurance executives across Europe and North America. The majority of our work is involved in in-depth research, market analysis, and our aim really is to truly understand the latest trends and innovations that are impacting the insurance sector, both now and in the near future. So we love to hear from the insurers. We find it incredibly exciting to meet the community, interview the market, and host seminars that help facilitate the industry's momentum in terms of innovation, especially in such an exciting period of disruption and potential that we're living in now. So today, the subject we are going to explore is around automation in claims. Claims can be seen from two sides, of course, the side of the insurance policyholder or that of the insurer. If you're an insurer, you must ensure claims are clear, non-fraudulent. You also need an effective loss ratio in place. In other words, there must be more money going in through customer premiums than going out via claims. Whereas if you're an insurance policy holder, you'll be making a personal claim if something happens to you, and this being the moment of truth. Now, this seems very simple and obvious to everyone involved, but it's worth reminding ourselves of this simple equation because this is what we always have to come back to. And the importance of effective claims cannot be underestimated. And in fact, those insurance businesses that have the best relationship with their policyholders are those which do all they can to support their customers in times of stress and misfortune. In fact, insurance customers don't really buy an insurance policy. They buy the confidence that their claim will be settled when they make it. And the policy isn't really any protection, but a quality claims process can return the customer to the situation they were in before an event quickly and painlessly. So automation, how can this help solve this simple equation and improve the efficiency of the process? Well, firstly, it can help the insurer in the presentation of the buying process itself, simply explaining what your insurance covers without the jargon. This reduces the likelihood of a nasty surprise later on and battling between the insurance company and the customer to receive payment. Automation may help the customer file a claim with a chatbot that's available 24/7 wherever there's an internet connection. So if you're stuck in a foreign country without a phone, all you need is a computer and a connection to the internet to make the claim. This means you no longer have to fork out on expensive overseas phone bills. It gives convenience, it gives speed, it gives choice to the policyholder. And also, automated chatbots can recognize you. This removes the need to have your policy number on hand and can speed up the process. It's convenient for both sides, and automation should be driven by the consumer's desires, but a true success is also defined by a happy, well-oiled insurer on the flip side of the coin. We've already seen companies, of course, like Lemonade that use automated technology to approve and provide insurance very quickly, and this is well documented. Them being one of the first companies to process a claim without human interaction, etc., etc. And meanwhile, Zhong'an, China's first digital insurer, had sold over 5 billion policies, 99% of which had been automated in some way. Now, almost all of the massive insurance companies are looking to provide their customers with a similar digital experience. But what lies in the future of automation? Even though automated claims will probably become the norm, and I would say there is definitely an ongoing developmental process within the insurers themselves, I don't think we'll reach a stage where they'll be fully automated, nor would this be a situation that is desirable. Chatbot technology enhances human intelligence. It doesn't replace it. And it can, in theory, interact with millions of different people with no significant additional cost or manpower. And it can, in theory, allow an insurer to spend more time helping people with complex or sensitive cases. It's a step towards 100% customer satisfaction, if that's possible. What else might we see? We might see chatbots for the customer service team, so that not only can this technology help customers engage and fill out a claim, but also the customer service team can use a chatbot for help with their responses. Let's imagine for a moment a chatbot uses natural language processing to transcribe your conversation with customer service. By rapidly sorting through massive amounts of data that could take hours for a human to look at, the chatbot could find the relevant answers and give them to a customer service team. And that would be an amazing service, improving the accuracy of answers and overall customer service quality. But now really is the time for claims to realize the potential that technology offers to satisfy the high expectations of the modern client. And with an intelligent understanding and manipulation of data, insurers can equip themselves to serve their clients' needs and rise above the competition. And with careful integration of automation, customer communication methods, and AI, the claims process is changing for the better and will continue to do so as the reengineering continues. But investment in claims is a necessity. Upskilling and then retraining and providing talented, empathetic claims professionals can result in increased retention of business, and also the acquisition of new business through recommendation and referrals. So today, we will hear from two contributors on their recent projects and initiatives around claims automation, some of the practical lessons they've picked up along the way, and how they might see the future. So I'd like to firstly introduce Scott Jacobs, Operation Excellence Lead for QBE European Operation Claims. Scott's been in the industry for 20 years now and has developed through various claims operation roles across a number of lines of business, and so has seen the entry and development of technological possibilities in the sector. For the last 5 years, he has led various transition programs, including offshore lead in transition to QBE's Global Shared Service Centre. And most recently, Scott has been the business lead in the company's innovation journey, specialising in robotics. So Scott, over to you to discuss some of your recent work, and
Sure.
I'll lead you. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Graham, and good afternoon to everybody. So from QBE's perspective, automation covers a number of different items. It can include analytics, workforce management, artificial intelligence, chatbots, APIs. Today, I'm going to talk specifically around robotics, and I'm going to cover off 5 key areas. So 1, what is robotics? What does it mean? 2, how does it work? 3, QBE's journey into robotics. 4, what are the key learnings and pitfalls that we've learned personally from our perspective, and also to speaking from our vendor for robotics capability. And then finally, the long-term vision and the industrialization of robotics, as it were. So I'll start off by giving a brief summary of what robotics is. And in a very basic sense, it's a software that automates software. As disappointing as it is, it doesn't involve robots sitting in the corner of your office that you can actually see. It is essentially a piece of software that is configured by you as the business that can either partially or fully automate a rule-based process. So there's 3 key benefits really for robotics. The first is it's very versatile. It can be used across most applications that you'd have, and is designed to mimic the actions of that of a user. So it can be used to enhance the customer experience, or it can remove the need for non-value adding tasks such as double keying of information and completing routine repetitive processes such as keying payments, adding information from claim forms and unlike. Secondly, it can be led by the business and for the business. So while, yes, there is a very vital need to have IT involvement, we see it personally as a tool that can be used by the business to drive their process improvements. It can link multiple existing legacy systems together without the need for lengthy, hard system integration. And that leads nicely on to the third benefit that we see, which is it is an economical tool to develop. So compared to hard system integration, it's very quick to implement, and you also get a very rapid return on your investment. So how does robotics actually work? So robotics is not really a new concept. Versions of screen scrapes have been around for some time, but it's now really developed to a stage where it's very flexible and very easy to implement into your business. So it does that by now interrogating coding behind applications, and It then builds the process to manipulate the screens as a human would. So, for example, it would read the code behind a cell or a column of the spreadsheet, copy that data, move that into one of your other systems, and then perform the functions of update or next. So it's going through the system as a user would do. And robotics is really split into two main categories. You have RDA and RPA, and I'll spend a little time explaining each one of those. So RDA is a robotic desktop automation. So this is a robot that sits on an individual's user profile, and think of it almost like a robotic arm sitting within someone's profile that assists them in their job. So it's designed to assist the user with their tasks, but at the same time, the user has ultimate control over the automation. Key features include items such as toolbars, wizards, and purpose-built user interfaces that you can build for your purpose. So to bring that to life, really, an example being, think about a motor claim report telephony, so a motor first notification of loss, and the user might have to carry out a number of checks while the customer is on the phone, and obviously seconds are vital for a customer service experience. In a normal non-automated world, the user might have to carry out a number of checks one by one, so they might have to do an MID check, a policy check, claims database check, HPI, all of these different things that would help them into registering the claim. Now, a user would normally have to take those tasks and do them individually. With the use of an RDA robot on their system, they could click a button, they could put the reg in, and it would go and simultaneously extract all of that different information from various applications at the same time. And it can then provide the user the information in a format that they would like, and you could construct it so it has rule bases that you design as the business to provide offers, validate information, add notes, all of those bits and pieces that a user would have to do individually. So second automation is what we call RPA, and that's Robotics, Process and Engineering. And this is a robot that usually sits on its own server and operates with very minimal or no human interaction. So the bot will be built to have a trigger, and this trigger could be a certain date, a certain time, the appearance of an item in a work queue. And then it picks this up and it processes the information through the system and then spits out an output file at the end. So you could therefore run it constantly or overnight or configure it to be triggered how you wish. RPA is predominantly used probably in sort of back office banking and finance functions, but it's very good for bulk processing of data. It can be as complex as you wish. So the business basically builds it to how you wish. So for example, you could have it so it's simply keys simple in process payments, or you can then develop that so after it's processed a payment, it can then interrogate your liability screen and then can reallocate a claim dependent on the rule base that you set activities, send emails, all of those things that if you have a rule base around it, then you can get a piece of robotics to work for you. So that explains briefly what robotics is and how it works. I'm now going to take you through sort of QBE's journey. So I would say we're probably relatively in our infancy on a robotics journey. At the start of last year, we sat down and we decided to do a POC just to prove that robotics can work on our systems and with our data. So we came up with two POCs, one which looks at setting up claims from a claims notification form from the MOJ portal, and then the other that processes payments from our main suppliers. So I'll talk through in a little more detail about how each one of those works. So looking firstly at payment automation, we have obviously vast numbers of bordereau spreadsheets that come in from our suppliers, and we need to process them. And pre-automation, we had someone sitting there and doing those line by line. Now, what the proof of concept has done, it's taken all that information and then it processes that automatically and spits out an export file at the end. So we could put through a spreadsheet of 500 lines of transactions. At the end, after a short amount of time, it spits it back out and says, these ones we've done, these ones we haven't been able to do for a certain reason. Now, there was quite a lot of re-engineering that we had to do to standardize our inputs, and I'll explain this a bit further when I talk about sort of the pitfalls and the things to look out for. So when we looked at our inputs that were coming in from our suppliers, we had about 30 different types of input, all in different formats, and very difficult for us to go back to our suppliers and say, in a very quick period of time, we want you to amend your data input so we can process it ourselves how we would wish. Obviously, they automate it. They've got some sort of automation themselves. It's being spat out of their system. So therefore, it would take a bit of change. So what we actually did is we engineered that process. So we take all of those 30 different input files and we've created something that macro enables that, so it forms it into one input file. You could build a robot to read 30 different input files, but that's quite complex. However, the way we've worked it out is that we can re-engineer the process so the robot only has to read one input file. So it then takes that information, as I said, goes through our claims system, updates relevant information, processes payments, processes recoveries, reserve movements, whatever we ask it to do, and then it allocates claims and activities set on rule sets. Then spits out an exception report, and you can configure the exception report how you wish. So at the end, it will come out and it will tell me that 5 claims we haven't been able to process a payment on because it's a possible duplicate. 5 claims, the claim is closed. 5 claims, indemnity is outstanding, and so on. It's now working live, and again, I can't go into obviously too much detail, but we're looking at circa 60,000 transactions in a year that's going to be going through that model. So second automation as our POC was, as I said, taking information from a claims notification form and putting that into our system. Now, we quickly found through analysis that although the CNF form is broadly formatted, there are certain fields where there are inconsistencies on how the data is entered into specific boxes. So, for example, postcodes could be slightly configured wrong. There might be spelling or grammatical errors and spaces, which you need to try and get the bot to configure. And that's possible, but again, it makes it more complex. So we also realized that although automation could take 90% of the process, there was still a number of key pieces of information that the human would still have to interpret. So what we did is we looked at it and said, okay, we could put this in over our existing model, but the bot would have to stop 4 or 5 times during that process and await a user to validate it. So we looked at it and we re-engineered the process. So all the information that we get from the CNF form is then extracted onto a personalized user interface. The robot then runs through and it pinpoints where the user has to input the information that a human still has to do. And then the person then clicks a button and it takes away and it does all the grunt work of adding that onto our system. So re-engineering the process has meant that we can have 10% manual work up front and then 90% is done by the automation at the back end. And again, that's now in. We're on track to be processing circa 20,000 transactions through that over the course of the next year, and that's across both motor and casualty lines of business. So that gives you a bit of an oversight into QBE's journey and what we've created and what we've done with robotics. And now I want to just go into really 6 key learnings and pitfalls that are based on both our own experience and conversations we've had with our robotics provider. So the first one is really for us to understand your systems and data and begin to format them. So one of the key things for us is to get the best use out of automation. The more formatted and standardized your data is, the easier it is to build robotics and the more effective it can be. And you can easily put a piece of automation over the top of a single process and code it to deal with a large number of exceptions. However, if you standardize your data, it's far quicker to build an automation and it's far easier to maximize your efficiency through standardizing your data first. The second one for us is robotics in our eyes should be led by a business development team and not an IT function. Although IT is very, very vital and it should be engaged as early as possible because they need to provide the platforms for robotics to work on in your systems, robotics mimics a user and should therefore be flexible and adaptable as the business changes and evolves. Therefore, a user-led approach is vital. That often is the case that IT don't always fully understand the requirements of an end user. Thirdly is don't come into robotics thinking you can automate full end-to-end processes immediately. Yes, of course, one of the biggest benefits is in terms of saving and efficiency, which a lot of people would immediately equate to an FTE saving. However, a common pitfall that our robotics provider has told us about is that people will take a high-level view and think that automation will instantly transform their business. It will do so, but it takes time and a lot of engineering of processes and data for you to get the maximum use out of it. We see very much that robotics and automation is a journey and one that should be taken step by step. Trying to do too much too soon will ultimately probably end up in a lengthy delay in delivery, which robotics is not what robotics is about. It's what it's trying to avoid. It should be a very agile delivery system. Number 4 on the list of pitfalls for us is don't neglect the user. In our view, robotics is there to assist the user and remove the non-value adding tasks to free up time to carry out more meaningful ones. Until such time as analytics and AI are in a fully developed state, the user will still be incredibly vital, and it's therefore vital that the user is involved in the journey and also trained on how to use the automation and how you bring that into your operating rhythm. The user and the robot should be working hand in hand rather than not against each other. Fifth on our list was plan for the future. So when you're starting to look at things from a robotics perspective, take a good look at your own processes and data. We see automation as the latter stage of a continuous improvement cycle. We believe that you'll get far more out of automation from cleaning up your processes first and then adding automation over the top, rather than thinking that automation can just sort out what are existing messy processes. And then lastly for us is, don't think that robotics is always a solution. Don't get me wrong, it's an amazing tool to have, but it should not be seen as the be-all and end-all. API, workforce management tools, and most importantly for us, people still have an integral and vital part to play in the processes. So the key is to pick and choose where robotics can deliver the best benefits back to your business. And just then sort of to finalize on that and to round up from a long-term view, QBE is looking to really build on their robotics capabilities now after we've had the POC, and we're developing the capabilities to do so. The long-term view is to start linking things like robotics, which I personally, use an analogy of this, is robotics for me is the arms and legs, which is what pushes things around, and analytics, which is the brain. So the long-term view is to start linking up robotics and analytics, and then artificial intelligence, which is probably the brain and the body learning together, so that in the long term, there is much more straight-through processing as possible. However, we are acutely aware that, again, this is a journey, and it's one that we're sort of now only coming to steps on, and it's going to take some time to really reach where we want to be long term. The good news is that we're now on that path. So in summary, robotics, a great tool for businesses, very versatile. You can do a hell of a lot with it from both a customer service perspective and also for enhancing your business efficiencies, and it can have a really huge impact. But just like any other tool, it's only as good and effective as the people and the processes that sit underneath it.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Scott. Lots and lots of questions coming in through that, especially during when you were talking through the pitfalls to avoid. So we'll save those for after Steve's piece. Steve, just to introduce you, again, Head of Claims Automation at RSA. Steve's done it all in his time, actually. Underwriter, product manager, claims leader, program manager, and now specializing in leading change in claims and delivering technology solutions. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Graham, and thanks, Scott. So I'm going to try and stay away from some of the things Scott was talking about, otherwise I'm going to bore you with the same stuff second time around. But just to set a little bit of context, so RSA PLC has got a reasonably wide underwriting footprint, so we will underwrite everything from pets to offshore wind farms, and we operate through direct, broker, and affinity. So we've got a reasonably complex organisation here. And in the claims unit, we clearly service the claims for all of those risks. And we do it on a variety of platforms. So we are spread across different systems and different applications of different ages. Nothing's really consistent for us. And we've grown that over time. So for us, automation is a little bit different to just robotics. It's actually anything that can take out manual effort from the handler and speed up the claim using technology. And the reason I set that context is that for us, it's just not one thing. It's actually a variety of problems and opportunities that are presented to us. And as we see technology developing, it's a question of trying to find the right solution for the right problem opportunity. Yeah. So we are applying that. The key thing, I think, and something that I'd give you as a lesson learned is whenever you are starting one of these tests or proof of concepts, just have an eye to the scalability of that across your product set for your wider organization, because it's very easy to get sucked into it's a square peg for a square hole, and that's great. But then when you look at the replication cost of that, that can sometimes come back to bite you. That said, automation is really helping us through the different guises that we're using to implement it. At any given time, I'll probably have 5 or 6 POCs happening in our UK claims operation just to understand where we can apply that technology. Some of those POCs will be extensions of things we've already done. and some of them will be completely new tech. And I think that's really exciting about our industry at the moment, is there are almost a blizzard of new opportunities being presented to us by different widgets and different suppliers. The real trick, though, is finding the things that you think are going to be the winners for the future. But if you step back as well, actually claims is kind of tailor-made for automation, isn't it? Because claims is about applying a rule set to a claim. So you should know what that policy is covered for. You should understand the nature of the causation of the loss, and you should find the best solution to that. So applying that rule set is something that automation can be really helpful to. And I think a really well-trained handler with the right information will make great decisions and drive the right outcome for both our customers and our company. So the challenge is actually how can technology and automation help them to do more of that and do it better and do it quicker. So we started in, I guess, a simple place. So we have used robotics. And we've used it pretty much, as Scott was talking about, as a shortcut to some of the current issues we have with our systems. So we have an awful lot of what we call swivel chair integration and dual keying, where a handler will have to use multiple different systems to find the information that they need. And sometimes that information is partial, it's not full. And what we found is a ready application of robotics is to get the robot to do that for them. So either automatically or manually triggered, the robot will run off to different platforms, gather the information needed, come back and present it to the handler and ask them to make a decision. Then press another button, another robot then writes that into the system for us. So those are kind of simple examples of what a robot can do. I have no shortage of those within my organization. And they're actually quite cheap to develop, quite quick to roll out, and they're again scalable, because if I do a robot development for one product, I'm almost certainly going to find the same kind of issues in another product and be able to reuse some of that development again. Equally, if a robot can recognize some characteristics of a claim, I can trigger it behind the scenes to run off and get information or to run some sanity checks for us, just to start giving the handler a view about what they should be doing next. Again, that's quite simple to run. I'll give you probably my second lesson learned. Don't try and eat the elephant all in one go. Start simple, build your experience, and build it over time. So especially with the business as well, you need to be able to demonstrate what this can do for them. So start with some simple examples, demonstrate that to them, let them see the value, and then you'll get the demand from the business for more. The other point just to draw out is sometimes, maybe in your organizations you get the same thing, you can get a little bit of a tissue rejection from the organization when you offer them technology. Actually, we do it this way and your technology is kind of a threat to me, I don't like it. What we find with robots is completely the opposite. Actually, the handlers love them because they're helping them to do a great job. So we described it, and we've had it played back to us actually as our operations see it, as the robot being like a little dumb friend that sits on your shoulder. It's not very clever, but it can do simple things and do it very quickly. And you click the button, it runs off and do a task, it brings it back to you. Actually, everybody's a winner. Yeah. The outcome that we see from that is clearly there's a reduction in effort. So lots and lots of processes happening over time, and we're making them a little bit quicker, but we're not re-engineering those processes end to end. Handlers actually find themselves moving away from administration and moving into value add stuff, which is actually where handlers want to spend their time, handling the claim. And we do get some improvement in accuracy. And a really important point is standardization. Even, and this sounds like quite a dull example, but even the way in which we write notes into the systems now, we can use robots to standardize that. At a glance, actually, when a handler goes back into the system and they read the notes, they're now expecting that common format to be there. It aids their comprehension. It aids the speed of them getting that into the brain and taking decisions. I'll give you an example, quite a powerful one. In our injury unit, which is, it's fairly specialized work, we've implemented robots now so that after core work on particular types of claim, the time associated with doing that used to be 10 minutes. It's now moved down to 30 seconds. So if you think about that multiplied by the number of claims that we would handle in any given year, that starts to add up as an efficiency saving, but actually you also get that bounce in terms of improved accuracy and standardization across your system. So the other way we've used quite simple robots is to augment the thinking for handlers. And what this means is we use decision engines behind the scenes, and we use, much as Scott was talking about actually, we use robots to be the integration between the two. So a robot will recognize some characteristics within the claim, realize that it has to go off to a decision engine, go and do that, and then present back to the handler, actually, here's a flag, you should take this kind of action, and then use another robot to actually write those notes back into the system. So those simple examples just give you a handle on what we can do at a very simple level. It's not massively expensive to get into that development space, and as I said, you can reuse. I guess going upstream a little bit into more medium complexity areas, one of the areas that we're very heavily involved in right now is digital self-service for customers, suppliers and brokers. And robotics and automation has got a massive part to play here. Now, obviously, the prize that you're looking for is to be able to potentially take more manual effort away from that, so less handler involvement. That's got an expense element to it that you can obviously mine for. But also what you're responding to is customer demand and a desire to make the claims life cycle as short as possible. And where we use robotics and automation within that is obviously providing the ability for customers to be able to self-serve in the first place, but then that integration layer, managing the logic of where do I get the information to be able to drive that process at the extreme, end to end. So straight through processes and no touch processes are kind of, the nirvana, aren't they? We've got a few of those operating now. Small scale, perhaps, vital test and learn for us, enabling us to understand and learn from what works and what doesn't, and how do we drive this out. And I think iteration is absolutely the key here. Overthinking everything, you'll probably spend 9 months in development and drive no value. Getting something out to market quickly, iterating from that and learning is definitely where we've seen the sweet spot. I'll give you an example. In pet claims for us, there's a phenomenon called repeat treatment. So a pet that needs repeat treatment over time can claim against the policy multiple times. That used to be a 2 to 3 week cycle time to actually fulfill that claim. We now have self-service in place and the necessary decision engines and logic behind that, driven by data, to be able to reduce that down to minutes. So we've gotten to a point where we can prove we can do it on a small scale, and now what we're doing is iterating to move that out. The benefits there, fairly obvious, yeah? What I would say, and I'd echo Scott again, iterate this, be agile in your development. Don't go for a kind of waterfall approach. I need to write everything down. Start small, learn from it, move it forward, and crucially, have the business front and center in this. It's not really an IS development we're talking about. It's how the business seizes control of its technology to drive the agenda forward. Okay. Right. I think also what should be hopefully starting to come through is this massive dependency on data. So I'll give you another good example where new technology is coming to the fore, not the things where we're using tools to drive things forward, but how do you auto-estimate on a motor claim and being able to take images of a claim and then use external software to run that through, come up with a view about whether it's likely to be a total loss or not. If not, actually, what are the parameters associated with the repair cost there? That's really, really good stuff, which we have a proof of concept on right now. It's looking very, very promising indeed. The interesting thing is it then starts taking you into some discussion and some thought about, so what does that really mean if you can automate big chunks of the process? Actually, take a step back. Do you understand your options? What else do you need to build alongside this technology which is going to make your organization successful? And that's through the dimensions of process, your organization, how do you face into issues around potential risk, particularly in the fraud area, and also what happens to your skills. So your recruitment pattern and your promotion pattern at the moment is based on your historical experience. As you start to chip away at manual and low value activity, well, what does that do to your organization? What do you need to start thinking about equipping people with skills for the future, and how do you train that into people? Actually, what are you recruiting for now? Is it subtly different to what you had in the past? Final thing from me is just really about where I think some of this stuff is going. So automation means many different things to RSA. I think it's a fascinating subject. Where there is some really interesting stuff happening is around artificial intelligence and machine learning and predictive analytics. Now, actually, insurance companies are pretty good at prediction. It's more or less what we do for a living. In claims, we've been constrained, I think, a little bit because we've got massive amounts of information, often on paper, often in unrelated databases with unstructured data, and we're actually quite weak on data itself. What I think technology is really great at is at spotting patterns and then informing you about where those patterns equal some insight, and that insight being able to be actionable by your organization. I think what's really interesting right now, very exciting for us, is the speed at which you can apply new tools and technologies spotting those patterns. And if you can do that using things like automation, how quickly can you wash that insight back into your claims handling techniques and methods? Right now, I might be saying, if I found something out about a particular type of claim that exhibits characteristics A, B, C, actually I now need to go and train 80 claims handlers to look for those characteristics, before I'll really get the value of that insight into my organization in terms of the bottom line. In the future, by connecting analytics engines directly into your claims handling through automation, that becomes automated. Actually, that knowledge is now washed back through your organization. The really interesting thing for me there is what you've effectively done is you've increased the intelligence of your claims handling capability across your organization, and that's tremendously powerful. So if you could take how we handle a claim today, if you can convert all the information that a handler sees in the right context and turn that into data, that's a really powerful opportunity to be doing something radically different in the future.
Great.
And back to you,
Thanks,
Graham.
Steve. Yeah, thanks, Steve. We've got lots of questions coming in, and I think the sensible thing to do here is to go back to the proof of concept stage that you both touched on. We've had a few questions around how this is sort of organized and set up within your company in terms of who's involved in this decision-making process. Is that all internal? Have you brought in any extra expertise or talent to assist with driving the proof of concept to a valuable conclusion? And Steve, you were talking about the importance of scalability during that sort of thinking phase. So just a little bit more flavor or detail perhaps around both of your proof of concept stages. What does that look like? You know, what are the sort of conversations? Who's involved in those conversations? Maybe we'll start with you, Scott.
Sure. Okay. So, interesting question. Probably from our perspective, and I'll go back to something that I said in the piece, and Steve reiterated, is that this really should, for us, be led by the business and not from an information technology side. So we actually land with robotics and automation within our operational excellence department, and operational excellence is there for us to listen to the voice of the customer, listen to the voice of the business. What do they need, and then come up with solutions around that. So we have people who are trained in Six Sigma methodology and lean engineering. So looking at waste and how can we look at sorting out our processes and then dividing that up into chunks. And as Steve said, it's a very vital point that you don't look at this and think that you can transform immediately. It's step by step, and then what you do is you learn from those learnings that you have through your projects, and then take that further. Now, you will need IT assistance in terms of how it sits on your system and how the platform works, and you possibly will need outside assistance from a delivery of an automation piece. But for us, if you are going to fully commit to this, it's about building an in-house capability. So having the right people around the table, the right people from the business who have a view across the business big enough to look at the scalability options, not just in one line of business. People who have the technology and expertise around analytics, and then people who have the expertise around your processes and how you re-engineer them. You bring all those together into one source of sort of an innovation hub, basically, and then I think that's the best approach that you could have from my perspective.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, so I mean, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think it's probably the flavour of the innovation and the proof of concept that you're confronted with. So probably the one that a lot of people will be familiar with is you have a supplier who's come to see you, who's trying to sell you a product, right? And in that case, certainly for us, the first test is a tried and tested, battle tested product that we can see elsewhere that we have confidence in, because we don't necessarily we don't want to be first adopter of somebody's technology opportunity. We actually want to see it in action. I think there, probably the keys for me are: does it conceptually stand up? Do you understand, where the potential costs and benefits are going to be? Absolutely get it business-led, not IS-led. That's the worst thing that you can do. Time box it is another big thing for us. So if you're going to run this proof of concept, for proof of concepts running any more than sort of like 4 to 6 weeks, I'd challenge whether you're actually trying to prove the concept or whether it's a pilot that's going to grow into business as usual just because it's there. And be really clear about your success criteria. So at a level, you should have a one page that describes what this is, what the opportunity would be, what you think potential benefits are, the test that you're going to run through, the cost and the plan, and at the end of it, here's the drop dead date by which we make a decision, yes or no. And actually, we found as well with suppliers that approach really helps, because the last thing they want to be doing is trapped in an endless test that never goes anywhere and never turns into a contract. I think the opposite to that is where you see an observer technology or a new set of methodology coming out, and you think about how could I turn that into one of my business problems. But it's the same techniques really. But I think they're quite often more interesting, because if you look at something like a predictive analytics and the latest cutting edge there, how do you get that into an existing organization, source the data, do it in such a way that the business feels like they are sponsoring it and they're owning it, and therefore its success is their success? That's probably the key. So there's a bit around just good, solid discipline, and there's a bit about just managing hearts and minds, what needs to be true.
Yes. Okay.
I think probably, sorry, Graham, I'll probably just reiterate one of those points that Steve said there. When you have numerous people come in and try and provide you with cases and things to look at, and they are very much off-the-shelf products, and they will show you the very happy path. The key is how you implement that into your business.
Yes. Okay. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach, unfortunately. We've got a few questions around, both of you touched on the importance of data and data management and well-organized data being crucial for sort of efficient automation down the road. And we have a question here sort of off the back of that, which says, is there a risk that robotics is used as a workaround for legacy system issues or poor data management and just pushes that problem further down the road? Do you think there's a link there? How strong is that link between really well-organized data and efficient automation? Is that really crucial?
So to answer that question really quickly, that's not a risk, that's an absolute reality, right? So yes, robotics is used as a sticking plaster to the fact that not everybody has solved their legacy problem. That's my world in a nutshell for automation, right? So if I could move immediately to incredibly well-structured data and 21st century claims applications for all my products, I absolutely would do. But I can't, and automation therefore helps me to move somewhere down that road. That'd be my answer.
Okay. Scott, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for me, robotics particularly is a tactical solution, not a strategic solution. But in terms of does it just shift the problem, what it does do is it starts to enable you to put your data in a kind of place that you want it to be. So think of it as an enabler. And think of it as two things. One, it's going to give you quite an immediate return on investment. And two, think of it as an enabler because it starts to help you format your data in the way that you want it to be.
Right. And okay. I just cap that off as well, just to say, if you're not throwing away your old mainframe stuff and replacing it with new technology, or involved in fairly extensive work on automation and new data stewardship, you're going backwards versus your competition. There's no error in that.
Right. Yeah, correct.
Okay. Just to group a few questions around the future of automation and claims handlers and how that scene looks. I know I recently read a report by McKinsey that suggested that over the next 10 years, up to sort of 25% of full-time positions in insurance industry may be consolidated or replaced, and that might be within, product development, operations, IT, admin support, etc., etc. We have one question up here which sort of is related to that and says, what competencies will be necessary for the claims handlers of tomorrow? What might a day in the life of a future claims handler look like? What are they going to be spending their time on when the more routine work has been automated? Because, of course, the automation journey will continue. There'll be things on the shelf now which are manual processes which will be switched to automation. So how do you guys, this is a tricky question, but how do you guys see the claims handlers of tomorrow? What's the balance going to be like? Scott, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay. So one of the things we always get tasked with here is we speak to the business. Why are we not able to do these real value-adding tasks for basically customer service and highlighting where the real pain points are in a claim and identifying fraud a lot better. they often get neglected slightly because people are having to do a lot of double keying and manual entry and that sort of thing. So for me, it's removing that element so you can really, really focus on, the handler can really focus on providing that ultimate customer experience, and really drilling down into the more detailed aspects. So there will be, for me, the more simplistic rule bases around claims, as Steve suggested in his part. They, for me, could be automated, but then you really need to retrain your guys on the real complex areas of identification of where things are going wrong out of the process, and then rectifying them. You're never going to get 100% of automation for a very long time. So what you need to look at it is, what can we put through automation, and then what do we do as exception handlers when they do identify there's a piece of exception, how they then look at that, how they speak to the customer, how they feed that back into the automation.
Yes. And Steve, how do you sort of view claims handlers of tomorrow and their roles?
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think the claims handler role has been evolving over time. It's never been static. It's still evolving. It will continue to evolve. And I personally think that's a good thing. So, what do I think if I put myself forward 5 to 10 years, right? The key things that you're recruiting from a claims handling perspective. Well, number one, customer and empathy, right? Because there will always be a massive demand when the customer's going through a stressful event. They want to talk to somebody who understands what that feels like and is able to put them on the path to recovery. Yeah. I think what a handler will be expecting and demanding is to be better supported than they are right now. So in my world, handlers have to occasionally go and look in filing cabinets for errant policy documents and schedules, which unfortunately the underwriters haven't put in the right place for them. I don't want anybody having to do that. I want that information delivered to them in a way which can be easily digested. And if that means I can apply intelligent analytics to it, to actually signal to them that when you go through this schedule, you will notice that points 2, 3, and 4 might be really interesting. You might want to have a look at that, Mr. Handler. That's just being better supported. Actually, the key thing that you want from a claims handler is negotiation. Right? It's kind of, a claims negotiator and adjuster is there to take the facts that they've got and drive the best value for them and their customers, right? And I think that's the skill that you're going to recruit for. In a way, you're taking away some of the simpler, some of the nif-naf admin type stuff. That's happening in every industry. It's not just us. It's wider financial services and beyond that still. And I don't think we're able to stop that, nor indeed would you want to, because the real value you get from this is a well-educated, very well-armed handler having a negotiation with a third party to drive the right outcome. Yes.
Okay, great. Couple of questions around sort of post-implementation of any automated processes, and sort of linking up the results of this implementation with measuring their successes and working perhaps with other departments to see, yes, the customer experience has been improved, or this has made a X, Y, and Z impact on our business. How do you both get involved in sort of quantifying how successful any changes have been made in terms of automation? Scott, how do you see that?
Yeah, sure. So again, that probably leads back into why we believe robotics and automation sits within an operational excellence department. We always put a lean engineer up front in front of the development, so we get a full analysis of time in motion, what success would look like, and do some real studies into volumes, times to transactions, what's our error rate, what will be our robot completion. And then you're trying to identify the key metrics that you're looking to deliver out of the delivery of your automation. So if you're talking about processing transactions, how many transactions are being put through? How much time is that equating to in terms of an FTE saving? What is our data accuracy improvement? What kind of information are we spitting out that's showing our exceptions? So we want to see a fall in exceptions. And what automation is very good at, it can also tailor it so you can really then manage your exceptions and start to interrogate them more. So when you've got someone who's processing a large number of transactions, it's very difficult to then manage what the exceptions are they're finding on a case-by-case basis. When you use something like automation, that will spit that out as a report to you. So you can then feed that back into the business, and it becomes a case of continual improvement. So for me, it's working out what your metrics are, what you're looking to deliver, and then you can start tracking that through the outputs of automation against what your targets were.
Yeah. You'd agree with that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only things I'd add just to emphasise is it's absolutely got to be business owned, right? So what did we think we were going to get out of it as a business? That saves you all of the potential messing around with he said, she said stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think it's a question of scale, right? So if I'm putting 10 robots into a particular area and I'm going to drop them all in because actually the training of that, simultaneously the training of that is simple, then I think you can probably measure the outcome from that. If I'm doing that across 6 months, I might just have a contract with the business that says these are still the right things to do. Yeah, I will measure the things in terms of user uptake, frequency of usage, that kind of stuff. But actually, an operation is usually quite a volatile area in terms of managing KPIs at a very micro level. And sometimes just, actually we can see the aggregate impact of all of those changes over time. Are we hitting where we need to be in plan? I think the interesting thing is trying to measure things like customer via NPS. When you've used technology, that's quite an interesting space to get into. Things like self-service, and we've seen some stunning results when we've done some stuff like that because you can measure that stuff in isolation, do your A/B testing, all those good things. So I think for me it's kind of horses for courses. But key thing though, business has got to own the benefit. They need to say, yes, I do believe your technology, if it's delivered in the way you describe, is going to give me, is going to reduce my process time by 2 minutes. Then that's their target they're trying to hit, right?
Yeah, good. Okay, I think that's a sort of positive note to end it on as well. There are obvious success stories here. They're quantifiable. It's working. It's an ongoing process, and it's changing the claims department and re-engineering the claims department for the better. So I'd just like to say a big thank you to you, Steve and Scott. It's been extremely insightful. If any of our listeners would like to contact me about this, you can add me on LinkedIn, which is Graham Proud, Project Director, Insurance Nexus, or you can drop me an email at graham.proud@insurancenexus.com. I would say briefly, of course, if claims is your business, dare I say your passion, then do take a look at the Connected Claims Europe conference we have in October on the 29th and 30th in London. We will be grouping senior claims, drivers of change and decision makers from insurers across Europe to discuss the latest challenges and innovations in the sector. So that's one to look forward to. And so that leaves me just to say goodbye from me and goodbye from Scott and Steve. And we hope to see you soon. And thank you so much for tuning in today and listening. Bye, guys. Bye.
Cheers.